Hello, friends, and welcome to today's episode. Craig comes home from work to spend Christmas with his mom, but she is living in a tent. Craig vows to do everything possible to catch the con artists when he learns about the cruel scam that put his mom out of business. When the cab pulled up to Craig's house, he couldn't hold back a smile. Since the Christmas lights weren't up yet, he could continue the family practice of decorating the house with his mom. He gave the driver a big tip and took his duffel bag out of the trunk. He was excited to surprise his mom with a holiday visit after weeks of hard training at Army boot camp. Craig didn't see the for sale sign on the yard until he began to walk up the icy path. What the heck? Craig asked as he let his heavy backpack bag fall off his shoulder. He looked up at the Victorian-style house where he had grown up and saw that the windows were empty and the Adirondack chairs were gone from the porch. He was shocked to see that his family had left their home, but his shock quickly turned to fear that wrapped around his heart like a fist. He took out his cell phone, scrolled to Mom's number, and pressed the call button. Almost right away, he heard the catchy 1980s song that his mom had set as her alarm from somewhere nearby. He went around the side of the house to find the sound and stopped. On the small area of grass, his old tent was set up. The mom was inside, wrapped in a blanket and looking shocked at her phone. She broke down in tears when she saw Craig coming up behind her. "Oh my God, Craig! Thank God you're okay!" Mom yelled as she ran after him. Craig looked at his mom as she hugged him tightly as if she would never let go. "Of course, I'm fine," he said. "What's going on, Mom? Why is the house for sale?" Mom wiped her tears away and leaned back a bit to look at him. "I had to pay your ransom, honey. Did those kidnappers hurt you?" "What kidnappers?" "I was at basic training, Mom, you know that." Mom turned her head. Mom said, "I got a call from a man who said he had your hostage." Her voice was shaking as she spoke. "He said they'd kill you if I reported the call to the military or civilian police, and the only way I'd get you back is if I paid them." Craig felt a chill go down his spine as he thought about what Mom had said. One thing was clear, some jerk had used the time he wasn't around because he was in basic training to scam Mom. "I tried to call you," Mom said, "but none of my calls or messages went through. I couldn't just leave you at the mercy of those horrible people, so I mortgaged the house." Mom took a sniff. "They foreclosed on the property when I told them I couldn't make the payments." "Were you really just at basic training all this time?" Mom looked at him. "Everything the kidnapper told me was all of that deceit?" Craig gave her a tight hug and said, "Oh, Mom. It really was a lie." Mom pulled away and put her hands to her face, saying, "I can't believe it. Those con artists robbed me." Craig leaned over to look Mom in the eye and said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll try to find the jerk who put you through this awful thing and get our house back from the bank. I promise you they won't get away with this." Craig went to see James, his friend. They met in basic training and went through a lot together. Craig put his life in his hands and hoped James could help him. When the doorbell rang, James smiled and said, "Hey, bro. I didn't expect to see your ugly mug again until after Christmas. I need your help." James gave Craig a frown and told him to come in. Craig told James everything that had happened since he got home when they sat down. James clenched his teeth and made a fist with his hand as he listened. James told Craig, "You and your mom are welcome to stay here, bro, but I have to tell you that your situation isn't unique. My mom got a call too. Exactly the same deal as what happened to you." Craig looked at his friend in shock and said, "No way. Is she okay? Did they rob her too?" "She can't sell her house and give money to someone on her own, so, no, they didn't rob her, but it wasn't for lack of trying." James wasn't happy. "Her health has deteriorated a lot lately, but she's too stubborn to admit she can't cope on her own and refuses to leave her precious Golden Street." Craig answered, "I also wouldn't want to leave Golden Street. It sounds great." James snuffed. "It's not what you're thinking, bro. Golden Street is a godforsaken neighborhood. The name is a sarcastic nickname the locals use." "Oh, I'm sorry, man, but you realize what this means, don't you?" James gave a sigh. "It means this scammer is someone from our own ranks. They know when we're out of contact at training and use the information to target our families and get them to pay a ransom." Craig smacked his fist into his hand. "We have to find and expose them. They can't get away with this. James cocked his head in an interested way. What do you want to do about it? Craig went to see the chief drill sergeant when he got back to base. Craig told his mother what happened after the man let him stand at ease. I'd like to ask for access to information about employees, Craig said. I want to warn the families of other recruits that this might happen to them too. Denied, said the sergeant in answer. We follow strict protocols regarding access to personnel info, recruit. I understand your concerns, but it's not your business and there's no reason for you to get involved in any investigation that may, or may not, be open to look into your claim. But, sir. The officer gave him a mean look and asked, Did I say you could talk? Sir, no, sir, but. The sergeant told the person, Get out of my office before I write you up. Craig tightened his hands as he left the sergeant's office. His mind couldn't wrap around how mean the man could be. It was important to warn the families of the other trainees, and he didn't see why the sarge would stop him. Craig might have stopped in the middle of the hall. What if his top drill sergeant knew about this plan? The man had seen all the personnel records and could stop any probe, as he had just shown. Craig took a quick look back down the hall. He almost went up to the sergeant right now, but he thought that might not be a good idea. At this point, he had to tell the company leader about the scam and his doubts about Sarge. Craig walked back the way he came. At the end of this tunnel was the commander's office. He wouldn't leave the building until he had stopped the con artists. The door to the senior drill sergeant's office flew open as he got close. The sergeant asked the trainee, Why are you still here? He then went into the hallway. Don't you understand the meaning of the word denied? Craig gave a smart answer, Yes, sir, I do, sir. The sergeant pushed Craig aside quickly and said, Then get going. Craig looked back over his shoulder even after he turned away. When Sarge walked into the commander's office, he cursed under his breath. He would get into more trouble with Sarge when he left the commander's office if he waited outside it. But Sarge was likely to stay with the boss for a while. Craig looked at the office door of the sergeant. This could be the perfect chance for him to get in touch with the families of the other trainees and look for information that could show Sarge was working with the con artists. Craig quickly went back to the sergeant's office and opened the door for himself before he could change his mind. Before sitting down in Sarge's chair, Craig looked around the office. It was hard for Craig to find the information he needed on his computer's screen because it was so simple. When he clicked on a few files, he was asked for a password. Craig yelled at the screen, Darn it! He didn't know what to do next until he saw a tab on the desktop that showed an app that was minimized. When Craig clicked on it, a list of names and phone numbers showed up on the screen. He was looking for information just like this. He made the paper print. Craig had a sick, sudden realization as he watched the printer. Sarge must have looked at this list right away after he left, which means he was already thinking about which family members he could scam next. Craig gnashed his teeth. The sergeant could not get away with this. He had to tell the boss about him. He had to first warn the people on this list, though. Craig took the page out of the printer and put it in his pocket. Once more, he minimized the app and stood up from the desk. He walked right into the senior drill sergeant when he opened the door to leave. So, the nosy recruit came back to look around my office, the sergeant said, giving Craig a mean look. Kiss your career goodbye, boy. You can't discharge me just for being in your office, Craig told me. Although Craig couldn't see the sergeant, he said, Matter of fact, I can. This definitely counts as a lapse in expected conduct, so I'll make it even better and give you an other than honorable discharge. Craig was shocked as he looked at the sergeant. He had always wanted to join the army and couldn't believe this was the end of his plans. A soldier walked into the hallway and saluted the sergeant. The sergeant told the soldier to take Craig away. When the man grabbed Craig, Craig yelled, You can't do this, and pulled his arm free. I know what you're up to, Sarge, and I will expose you. Sergeant turned his back on Craig and shook his head. The man's soft smile as he closed his office door was the last thing he saw of him. Before getting on the bus that would take him home, Craig sat in a cheap diner and drank bad coffee. He was still mad at the sergeant and felt bad that he didn't tell the captain about the con artists right away. But he knew everything he needed to know to carry out his own plan. The next number on the list he had printed from Sarge's computer was called. He put his coffee cup down and called it. When a woman picked up the phone, Craig said, "Hello, ma'am. My name is Craig, and I'm calling to warn you about a scam." He told her everything he knew and told her to get in touch with him if the con artists called her. "I'm determined to catch them, but I need your cooperation to do it," he said. The woman said she would tell Craig if someone called her wanting money to free her daughter. Craig took her name off the list and went to the next number. Craig talked to everyone on the list over the course of 2 days. He and his mother were still living at James's house at that time. Craig got a job working for an old friend's uncle, but he couldn't find an apartment until he got paid his first check. It had been almost a week since Craig had last heard from his friend. He was leaving work to go home. A woman with a shaking voice asked, "Craig? I just got the call you told me about. They said they have my boy. Are you sure he's really at training?" "Very sure, ma'am. Now, they'll probably call you back shortly. Tell them you have the cash ready and ask where you need to leave it, okay? Once they tell you the location for the drop-off, call me back and I'll take care of the rest." Craig stopped in shock as he came around the bend. James was getting out of a cab that was parked outside the house. "James? What are you doing here?" James turned his head away and said, "I got special leave." His lips pulled into a straight line. "My mom, it's not looking good, bro." Craig walked in with James and gave him a pat on the shoulder. He was definitely mad, but he was able to keep it together. "I'm probably not going to be around here much," he said. "I'm going straight to see Mom, and I might not be back today." "The only thing that matters is that you can be here for your mom," Craig said. Soon after, James left to go see his mom. Craig wanted to help his friend more, but there wasn't much he could do. He should have instead focused on getting those con artists caught. After an hour, the same woman called Craig again and said the con artist wanted the money to be sent to a park on the other side of town. They agreed to what Craig said they should do next, even though the mother was scared. "Don't you worry about a thing, ma'am," he said, "and whatever happens next, remember that it's just a scam. Your son is not in any danger and never was." Craig got to the drop-off spot early. He sat on a bench with a soda and a burger and tried to look like he really was there. He had just talked to a woman who left after putting a bag in a hole at the base of a nearby tree. Craig only had to wait for someone to pick it up. Not long after, a skinny man in a hoodie came up to the tree. Craig rolled up his burger wrapper in a careless way and walked over to the trash can nearby. As Craig got closer, the guy in the sweater turned his back on him. It was clear that he didn't want to be seen. Craig jumped out of nowhere when the man went for the bag. He ran quickly from the trash can to the man carrying the bag over his shoulder. He must have heard Craig or seen him out of the corner of his eye, because he ran away. Craig yelled, "No, you don't. Stop right there." The man wouldn't listen, but Craig, who was army fit, was too strong for him and the big bag made him weak. Craig grabbed him, pushed him against a tree, and held his hands behind his back. Craig grabbed the man's hood by the back and pulled it off his head. "Now let's see your face." The young man in the sweater looked at Craig with one eye open and said, "Hey, man, you're wrong. I'm just the pickup guy." Craig clenched his teeth. For sure, this was the end of everything. He would catch the crooked Sarge in the act, report him, and get Mom's money back. He had to deal with this kid instead. Craig's grip on the strange man's wrists got tighter. "That means you're delivering this to someone whose identity and location you know, and I want that information, kid." He looked at Craig with a frown and said, "All I do is check a box on a custom app to show I got the package. I don't know anyone's name or number. I don't even know where to take the stuff until I've checked my box. Only then do I get the address to make the delivery." Craig took his hold off of the guy. "Check the box. You're going to show me the address, and don't even think of trying to run." He took his phone out of his pocket and said, "Whatever, man." Craig looked over the guy's shoulder as he checked a box in a very simple app. He said, "It doesn't usually take this long, after a while. Most of the time, the address comes through immediately." Craig felt sick to his stomach. He took a quick look around the park. On the well-lit walks, there were still a few runners and people walking their dogs, but it was getting dark under the trees and in the bushes. The con artist could have watched from afar as his delivery person picked up the package. This would mean that he knew everything and wouldn't send the address for delivery. Craig was wrong, and he missed his chance to catch the sergeant in the act. "You know, you're a darn fool to get yourself caught up in such shady business," Craig said to the guy. "Do you even know what's in this bag? You're too young to end up in prison for following blind orders from someone you've never even met." The guy laughed. "What do you know, man? When you live on Golden Street, jobs like this are an honest day's work. All I'm trying to do is put food on the table without having to join a gang." "Golden Street? That's where my friend lives," Craig said. He took his phone out of his pocket and opened a picture of himself and James. "Do you know this man?" The guy laughed as he looked at the picture on Craig's phone. "You think I don't know James? Man, his mom is my neighbor. My aunt goes round there every day to help the old lady." Craig shook his head and put his phone away. The scammer's name was slowly becoming clearer as the pieces were put together, but he still had to catch the jerk. That's when he knew what he had to do. "You're going to hit me on the nose now and run," Craig told the delivery person. The guy made a face at Craig and asked, "What?" "Just do it, or I'll report you to the police." This person took a step back and raised his fist, saying, "You're weird, man. But since you're asking for it." Craig went back to James's house to get a tissue for his nose that was broken. The tears in his eyes had stopped, but his face was swollen, and his nose needed to be sorted out. "What the heck happened to you?" Over James's shoulder, Craig saw him looking into the bathroom mirror. Craig said, "I almost caught the con artists tonight. But the guy escaped with the money. I now owe one of the soldiers' mothers a big chunk of cash, and I'm no closer to catching the man behind all this. There was something you should have told me, James." He put his hand on Craig's shoulder. "I could have helped." Craig turned his head away. "You need to focus on your mom. How's she doing?" James took a deep breath. "Still stubbornly refusing to move to a care home. I'd feel a whole lot better if she had nurses on hand to help her until I can pay for her surgery. But enough of my problems." James pointed at the door. "You need to take some painkillers and rest." Craig said, "Yeah, I think that's what I'll do." At midnight, a sash window on the front of a simple house slowly opened. Through the crack, a shadow slid in and hid behind a sofa right away. The only sound in the room was the intruder's faint raspy breathing. After a short time, the man in the shadows walked over to the old TV stand and began searching the drawers at the base. He looked under the couch and then went into the kitchen. He looked through the cabinets and slowly cursed when he couldn't find what he needed. That person was on the stairs that lead to the bedrooms when all the lights in the house turned on. The thief put up an arm to cover his eyes. Though he went back the way he came, a siren went off in front of the house, and blue lights flashed through the windows. The thief turned around quickly and ran to the back of the house. He got a pan from the kitchen and raised it to break a window, but a voice he knew stopped him. Craig grabbed the stranger and pointed his gun at him. "I never thought the person I trusted so much could turn out to be such a traitor. How could you do this to your friends, James?" James yelled, "I did what I had to do." "How did you even figure out it was me?" "Greed," Craig growled. "I had to test you when I found out you were connected to the scammer's delivery boy, and you just failed." James looked up at Craig and asked, "Didn't you lie to me? The kid didn't get away with any money when you caught him in the park." "Not a penny. That bag was filled with newspapers, but I knew you'd come looking for the money if you were the scammer. That was the whole point of hiring someone you knew, wasn't it? You'd know where to come looking if he decided to double-cross you." James took a deep breath and glared at Craig. "I needed the money. I thought it could wait until my sign-up bonus came through from the army, but Mom isn't going to hold on much longer if she doesn't get surgery." James poked Craig in the eye and said, "Wouldn't you do anything to help your mom? Didn't you start this whole freaking crusade because of your mom?" "I was just doing exactly the same thing you've done." Craig yelled at his old friend, "It's not the same. You lied and stole. You targeted the families of your friends. I refuse to believe you couldn't have found a better way to get the money you need." The cops then rushed into the room. Craig thought for a moment that James might try to fight the police, but James slowly raised his hand. Craig saw the police tie up James and take him away. His heart was heavy with the pain of his friend's betrayal and a new fear. He thought he'd feel better when he finally caught the con artist. He took a quick look at the broken-down house next door, where James's mother lived. He realized then that all of James's work to get his mom the money she needed for surgery had failed. James didn't save his mom, he put her in danger. Craig couldn't leave the woman in need. At that point, he knew what he needed to do next. After a month, Craig looked up to see the small room's door open across from him. James walked in slowly, wearing an orange costume and being followed by a grumpy guard. James asked as he walked toward the table in the middle of the room, "What are you doing here?" "I came to tell you your mom's operation was successful." Craig put his hands back together on the table. "She's being kept for observation, but the doctor thinks she'll be able to discharge her this week." James slouched in the chair across from Craig and asked, "What?" "But she couldn't afford the surgery, neither could I, that's what got me into this mess. I went back to base and talked to the commander. Everyone, even the families you robbed, came together to help your mom raise money." Craig looked James in the eyes and held them. "You should have come to your friends and asked for help from the beginning instead of trying to rob us." That's it for today, friends. Please let us know what you think about this story. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon for more amazing stories.